Hi, and welcome to another edition of A Conversation with Father Orsi. I'm BC Cloutier, and this is Father Michael Orsi. Hello, Father. How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
Glad to hear it. Today, Father, I thought we would talk a little bit about spiritual war. Now, there's other wars we can talk about, but let's stay on the spiritual side by now. I wanted to read a quote, and that is, "The day you declared your love and devotion to our Lord Jesus Christ is the day Satan declared spiritual war on you."
Yeah.
People often don't think in those terms, but I've said this before. It's a cartoon thing, but the Lord is on one shoulder, Satan is on the other. God's given us free will, and it's up to us to decide which way we're going to go.
Yeah. Let's talk about spiritual warfare first, and then we'll talk about warfare in itself, what we know to be a human war or a battle, because it's the same root. It's spiritual, because warfare is brought upon us by, in fact, evil. War may be good to overcome evil. That was the truth behind the war we had with Germany, World War II. Truth we had with Japan, World War II. So war can accomplish some good by overcoming an evil.
Well, By the way, there are those who would say that all wars are fought over religion.
Well,
that just introduces another.
Yeah, it does. But I suppose because you have to discern what is religion, right? So if your religion is National Socialism, which it was like a religion, a pagan religion, or your religion was the religion of the shogun in Japan, and Tojo. Well, yeah, I suppose in that sense the religion. But you talked about spiritual warfare, and that once we become Christians, we are involved with spiritual warfare because Satan becomes our great enemy, and Satan is out to destroy us. A lot of people don't think about Satan anymore. Oh, yeah, that's a myth. It's make-believe, right. Well, if you don't believe in Satan, you don't believe in God either, because the bottom line is that God came to save us from sin, from evil, from Satan himself. And even the devil tried to tempt Jesus. You recall that. That was major spiritual warfare. You folks remember the beautiful story of our Lord before he begins that public ministry of his, that he goes out to the desert to pray. And he's trying to garner all his spiritual strength for the mission that he had. And the devil comes around to tempt him. And he's out there praying, and he's fasting, he's starving, he's weak, he's emotionally weak and physically weak, and but not spiritually weak, okay? Because the devil comes around, and the devil tempts him, change these stones into bread, and
right,
you'll have the whole world, at your feet, and, jump off the parapet of the temple, and you'll become famous, and everybody will worship you, All right. That's the devil tempting Jesus. But it's also the way that the devil tempts us. It's a spiritual warfare. The devil tried to knock Jesus off his course, right? And of course, Jesus succeeded. Why? He fortified himself in prayer and fasting. And a lot of people today, they don't think about fasting anymore. Fasting is very efficacious. What does that mean? It produces a tremendous amount of spiritual strength in our lives, and it is a source of God's grace. When we can deny ourselves something. Remember, we talked a couple of weeks ago about pride. It's all about me. I want that Big Mac. But wait a minute. I'm going to give that up. It's meat. I'm not going to have meat for Lent. Just say, or every Friday. We talk about Friday. But every Christian knows about fasting, prayer and fasting. And it's something we hear about, but we've kind of lost it. Jesus was fasting. He refused to change those loaves, those stones, into loaves of bread.
The devil taunted him to do that.
Oh, gosh, yeah. It's like, see, folks, I'm a diabetic. Now, there are certain things that I shouldn't eat. But if someone keeps passing by me with apple pie and ice cream on top, it might be tempting for me to take a little piece. But you know what happens? You have to take a little piece. You
You
try to
want
take a bigger
more.
piece.
Right.
And if you don't watch that, what happens is your blood sugar goes crazy and you end up being very, very sick. So, I mean, that's how sin is. It doesn't come like all at once. The devil doesn't come at you all at once and say, hey, this is a good idea that you do this. It's a good idea that you commit adultery. It takes time. The devil works in time, little by little by little. It breaks down your spiritual armor, and all of a sudden you find yourself giving into things that you would not have given into before. And it comes like, yeah, she's cute. Yeah, I think I should text her online. And a lot of marriages end up in trouble because of Facebook and texting.
Right.
And so, little by little, the devil's way of seeping in. And that's the spiritual warfare that we're involved in. If you don't pray, if you don't fast, I mean, you're gonna end up in big time trouble.
Well, and I do think you make a good point. But if you look at if you study criminology, right, criminals don't start by committing felonies. They start by committing misdemeanors, and when there is no consequence, they move on to something larger. And I think that is a good analogy for sin.
Yeah.
That you commit a venial sin, and it doesn't seem like it's any big deal, and you progress.
Yeah.
And the devil is making progress as you progress.
Little by little by little. You talk about incrementally. I got to get this in, folks, because some of you may know that I'm involved with St. Matthew's House, the drug and alcohol rehabilitation. When you talk to a lot of addicts, you say, well, how did you get started in this? Well, I started with pot.
Right.
All right. When people tell you that pot is harmless, it's not harmless. It's a gateway drug. It leads to worse drugs. And all of a sudden you have somebody that becomes a full-blown addict. So you hear people about, legalizing marijuana. It's a great idea. No, it's not a great idea. It's not a good idea at all. We're now here in places like New York City, where they have vending machines where you can get paraphernalia for drugs, crack pipes. And they say, well, this is a good thing. At least, it's not infected and they won't rob and steal for it. Yeah, who's kidding home? I mean, what you're doing is you're providing an evil avenue for these people to get more and more drugs and become more and more dependent on substances that will eventually, it'll ruin their lives, but it'll also, in many cases, end their lives. Just had a funeral a couple of weeks ago. And I've had a lot of these lately. But young man, only 33 years old, and he died of an overdose. Now, I've had a lot of these. This is not the only one. Fentanyl. And, I get into the funeral home, and I notice a lot of other young people there. And, you can just take a look. I mean, folks, old Father O has been around long enough to know when somebody is fooling around with drugs. I know it. I can smell it. All right? I looked at that room. Of course, there were other relatives there, just kind of average, normal type aunts, uncles, cousins. But the friends, birds of a feather flock together. Birds of a feather flock together. And I took 20 minutes at the funeral home to talk about the evil that drugs do. And then I pointed to the corpse and I said, that is the result of drugs. And that can happen to you. And for some of you, it will happen. Now, little by little, did he start off a druggie? No. Did he come from a good family? Yeah, a lot of people that are addicted to drugs come from very good families. Families where there are people who are doctors and lawyers and CEOs and XYZs, and they begin to fall into drugs little by little. And parents out there, if you say that my son or daughter is smoking pot, there's nothing wrong with that, you better think twice.
Well, yes, absolutely. But this is compounded by the fact that fentanyl, the drug producers, not the street dealers, the people that are producing this stuff, realize that fentanyl improves the, dare I say, efficacy of their product. So they're squirting a little fentanyl on marijuana. But they're not doing it scientifically. They're doing like, put some fentanyl on there because we'll sell more next week. People are dying from something as simple as smoking a joint.
You better believe it. And last year, over 100,000 people overdosed on fentanyl. And believe me, folks, I've seen it. I've been to homes where parents would find the corpse of their son or daughter overdosed from fentanyl. Been at the hospital when the bodies arrived. And then some people say to me, some parents will say to me, or some boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, I didn't know he had a heart condition. Folks, young people, for the most part, do not die of heart attacks. Right? It's fentanyl. But people want to stick their heads in the sand. But that's evil. And we talked about the beginning of the compromises with the marijuana, and then it leads to worse drugs. And it becomes a whole culture. As I said, birds of a feather flock together. Take a look at who you're hanging out with. That's who you are.
Right. There's no doubt about that. No, one of the first things you learn in the 12 Steps program, whether it's for narcotics or alcohol, is you have to disassociate yourself from those people that you were using with.
Right.
The one bright spot I've thought about, and I have no idea if this will come to be, is if I were, a young buck again, I think I would be very, very hesitant to use any kind of substance.
You would think,
because of the possibility of death. I mean, this isn't, we're not talking about, you're going to get a really bad hangover if you drink that bottle of tequila. Yeah. We're talking about you're done.
You're done.
Scary stuff.
It really is scary stuff. BC, I'm just going to close with this. Certainly there's such a thing as free will, and addicts are responsible, in the beginning anyway, for making a wrong choice. Later on, free will is broken down because the brain chemistry has changed. Marijuana changes brain chemistry. The synapses of the brain are not operating the same way. I have seen PET scans and CAT scans where portions of the brain have changed because of it. So once you get hooked, it's very, very difficult to get unhooked. It's coming into this country, for the most part, over the border. It's Central America and Mexico, and it's coming in from China. And the Chinese know everything that's going in and out of that country. You know what's going on? This is a war going on with China. But they're going to kill us by letting us kill ourselves. So law enforcement has to be very, very tough on the people who are bringing in drugs into our country. And the politicians have to do something about closing off that border. That's where it's coming from.
We will be back right after this.
Hey, gang, I know a lot of you sometimes can't watch all of our episodes of Action for Life. However, we have a solution for that. All you have to do is go to YouTube and search for Action for Life Florida. And you can catch up on all the shows, and guess what? Extra added bonus, you get to hear my weekly homily. So, YouTube and you make a fine couple.
Welcome back to a conversation with Father Orsi. I'm B.C. Cloutier. Father, there is spiritual warfare, and there is physical war. Mm-hmm. Right now, nobody wants to call it a war. There's a war in Ukraine going on between Ukraine and Russia. It's a war.
Right.
What's going on? What? And also, how do we as Catholics reconcile the need to go to war with our moral beliefs?
Okay. First of all, as I said earlier, the devil is involved from the very beginning, because devil turns the hearts and minds of men away from God. And of course, that sin of pride, where nations are willing to kill other nations to gain hegemony in the world. Right now, what about a Christian concept of war. Certainly, there is a just war theory. There are a number of just war theories. First one, I think, we'd have to go to St. Augustine. He's the first one, but Luther had a just war theory. Calvin had a just war theory. So there have been numerous people have attempted a just war theory. I will go to St. Thomas Aquinas. I'll give you a couple of general principles, and then we'll take it from there. What do you do with it? As I said, first of all, war, although it has its root in evil, is not always evil if you're trying to overcome something that is evil. We talked about, Nazi Germany, all right? And it was the right thing to fight against the Nazis. Now, what is the just war theory? A war is just if it is proclaimed by a legitimate authority. In other words, the one that has the right to declare a war. In this country, of course, it's the president, Congress, and the president. All right, Congress. We've skipped this step too many times
since Vietnam.
Yeah, with a police action. No, we have to follow the Constitution. The president is not invested with the powers that belong to a monarch. Okay, so it begins with declaration of war coming from the Congress. President can petition the Congress for that declaration. Folks, remember that. Remember that. The Constitution. Okay. The second thing, it has to be in response to an attack. Now, this gets a little bit difficult. Responding to an attack, it means that somebody is attacking you, and what you're doing is you're trying to repulse the attack. Now, that's good for medieval times, when, some knights in armor were, crossing the border and you want to push them back, or they're attacking your city, your town to pillage, and you just try to repulse them to push them back. These days, we have satellites, and we can see things going on. Troops building up, just as story with Ukraine. Ukraine, the Russian troops were building up for a long period of time. They kept on being questioned, and what are you doing, and warning. We're not doing anything. Don't worry about it. And sure enough, it happened. Okay. So it has to be, we are trying to repulse an enemy, but these days that has to be nuanced too. And the third thing, it has to be proportional. And what does that mean? Okay, so if I have an invading army coming at me with, traditional weaponry, guns, rifles, I have no right to drop a bomb on them. Okay, so people often talk about this when it came to the atomic bomb in World War II, and that's another long discussion in itself. Was Harry Truman justified in doing what he did? Some say it was inherently evil because of the great damage that it did, but some say if Truman didn't do it, the war would have continued and another million American lives would have been lost. So again, it's a matter of tremendous amount of discernment taking place and nuance to see what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Now, talk about Ukraine. As I said, the Russians were surrounding Ukraine for a long time, or interested in gaining Ukrainian territory. And first of all, they took over Crimea in 2014, and then the present area that they have wanted, Harmut, am I correct?
I think that's right.
Yeah, I think that's correct. They are invading that area. They want that to be part of Mother Russia. Now, let me just be clear about this. It's never right that one country invade another country. Vladimir Putin is a bad man, okay? He has visions of the reestablishment of Mother Russia. I'm not saying Soviet Union, but Mother Russia, taking possession of those countries surrounding Russia. Some say it's because he believes they're threatened. And look, maybe if I were Putin, I'd feel that way too. NATO's all around me. They're going to come in here. They're going to come into Ukraine and set up bases in Ukraine. So let's look at both sides of this thing. Was he wrong to invade? Yeah. Did he think he had a legitimate cause to invade? Yeah. Well, where are we then right now? Let me be honest with you, folks. You have to make some calculations in war. The object of a war is to win.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Now, is all fair in love and war? Well, I don't think so. Not everything is fair. And that's why you have, United Nations and organizations like that and the rules for warfare, right? Now, what about Ukraine? The problem with Ukraine is you have a lot of people in there who consider themselves to be ethnic Russians.
Russians, right.
And I was in Ukraine. Folks, I was there, and I would ask the question. I'd say, would you still want to be part of Russia? Do you think you were better off with Russia? And many of them would say, makes no difference. It's all the same to us, all right? Putin, Zelensky, same. That's what they would say. And some, of course, would say, no, we don't want anything to do with Russia, but it's according to where you lived.
I spent a lot of time in Ukraine doing business there, and it was interesting that older people thought communism was fine.
Yeah.
And they were kind of disappointed that Ukraine was democratic because they weren't getting what they were getting before. Now, young people, different story.
Right.
Which is the inverse of what we're seeing in America.
Right. So, you have now Russia being an aggressor and going into Ukraine. And as I said, you have to balance. You have to say, what's going to be the end result of this? In other words, you can't decide I'm going to fight a war knowing that I'm not going to win this war because it's a waste of life.
Except if it's Afghanistan. But we won't go there.
We won't go there. Okay. So you look at the situation. You say, well, Russia is better armed. Russia has more people. And right now we're seeing a slaughter of Ukrainians. I think 350,000 Ukrainians have been killed already. Now, can Russia win? Russia can win certain parts of the Ukraine. What it takes is diplomatic skills to end this war. The purpose is to end this war and to stop the killing. Look, you think the Russian people want to be in that war too? You have their young men being killed, throwing them out onto the front lines. They're emptying out the jails and hospitals, throwing out these people on the front lines. But the numbers of deaths on the Russian side are a lot less than on the Ukrainian side. Right? So is it worthwhile to fight for something that is not salvageable? And that's where you have to have people of discerning minds to say, maybe it's time that we have a negotiated settlement. And that's where it's at, folks. That's where it's at. A lot of people are talking about, well, we're going to win this war. And, the Ukrainians are right, and Vladimir Putin is a bad man. You might believe all that stuff to be true, and it may very, very well be true. But the bottom line is, you might be right, but it might be your last right, And that's where we are right now. You hear very few people talking about negotiating a settlement. Very few. You know who brought this up? Xi. Xi wants it.
It's the only solution.
Yeah, it's the only solution. But you don't hear it. And you don't hear it in our own country either. What you hear is, we're going to supply more weapons. And I'll tell you what the sin is underneath all this. The sin underneath all this is the military-industrial complex. And this came from President Eisenhower. I was a little boy. I guess I was 10 years old when he gave his farewell address to the nation. And my father was listening to President Eisenhower. And I remember him talking about the military-industrial complex. I didn't really know what it meant.
Right.
But now I get it. It's the money-making machine for the elites in America. And we're supplying all kinds of weapons for Ukraine. And we're making money on it. And nobody here is talking about negotiating a peace, which is sometimes common sense. Common sense. Negotiate before you can't negotiate.
And that's the only solution to this war.
And
we'll be back. Action for Life is proud to sponsor a conversation with Father Orsi. Action for Life is an all-volunteer, pro-life, interfaith ministry that's focused on the sanctity of life from conception to natural death. In addition to sponsoring this TV program, Action for Life provides financial support and life assistance to any woman who wishes to carry her baby to term in anticipation of an adoption. Action for Life also provides financial assistance to a variety of pro-life organizations, including maternity homes, pregnancy resource centers, anti-human trafficking agencies, and sidewalk advocates, but to name a few. Please consider making a donation so that we can continue in the fight to save preborn babies. You can donate online at actionforlife.org. Thank you and God bless. Welcome back to A Conversation with Father Orsi. I'm B.C. Cloutier. Father, final thoughts?
Wow, we have some really final thoughts on this one. We hope they're not final because we are on the verge of Armageddon, the way things are going, and our world is becoming more and more dangerous. We can be dragged into a war in Ukraine.
Or
just like
in China.
Well, just like we got dragged into Vietnam, a war that we had no intention of winning at all. A war in Korea. It just, stopped halfway. At least the South is safe, we hope. But war has to be something that is prevented. And we have to take opportunities to prevent war from beginning, but also to prevent a war from continuing. And, once again, I'm going to go back to clergy. Clergy, I think you have sold yourselves short in many areas. You are involved in a lot of the cultural issues of the day. Some of you, as I said, you've sold out. I don't know what you are anymore. But one of the things that you should be doing is you should be talking about peace, because blessed are the peacemakers. They will be called the children of God. And what about peace? Do you get from your pulpit, do you talk about we have to have a negotiated peace in Ukraine, and to encourage people to vote for politicians to try to have a negotiated peace? We have to face reality. Look, folks, the world has never been perfect, right? There are some, bad people in the world, bad politicians, bad leaders of nations, and certainly we have to say, hey, that's wrong, and we don't approve of it. But we also have to be able to say, listen, the most important thing is that we save human life.
Yes.
And do what we have to do in order to end a war, which is oftentimes futile. And we saw that, as I said, in Vietnam. We saw that in Afghanistan. What more do we need?
All those lives, all that money, nothing has changed.
Not one thing has changed.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for another edition of A Conversation with Father Orsi. Please join us again next week, same time, same channel. Until then, have a great week and God bless.